Why do we call it second language learning and not second language acquisition? Today we are going to discuss the difference between the two and learn about parts of the brain and how their role in language learning. To put it a little too simply, language acquisition is a passive process and language learning is an active process. During language acquisition, infants and toddlers are not explicitly taught language. Over time, as they are exposed to language, their brains are able to begin using language. It is theorized that since infants and toddlers are within this critical period, they are able to absorb language more naturally than those outside this period. It is important to remember that a person's first language must be acquired and that the acquisition process must happen in a natural and spontaneous environment. First languages cannot be taught, and if the infant cannot naturally access the language, then that language cannot be the infant's first language. When it comes to deaf infants, their natural language is sign language, as they will not respond to spoken language input. This does raise a question about deaf children and first languages. However, this is a separate topic and discussion. Therefore, we will not pursue this inquiry further. Language learning is an active process. Either through classroom and direct instruction and guidance or being self-taught, the person has to actively learn the language. Exposing a person to a language over a period of time will not lead the person to suddenly being able to use the language. Instead, the person learning a new language has to be an active participant in their learning. Reviewing, practicing, making connections, struggling, and more. It is theorized that after we reach a certain age threshold, after the critical period, our brains are no longer equipped to absorb languages. Sadly, that threshold is a young age, meaning high school students who are learning a second language are at a disadvantage to their elementary school peers, who are still in the critical period. Finally, a big difference between language acquisition and language learning is during language learning the person already has the knowledge of a language. Therefore, as they learn a new language, they are dependent on their knowledge and understanding of their first language. The student actively makes connections between the new words, grammar, and definitions being introduced in the second language to words, grammar rules, and definitions in their first language. So, what is happening in the brain during language learning? First, let's look at three important areas of the brain. The first is the arcuate fasciculus, which will connect Broca's area with Wernicke's area. Together, these two areas of the brain are responsible for language production and language processing. The Broca's area is responsible for speech production as it holds the information on how to produce the phonemes of the languages known. It also plays a role in language comprehension, being the area that stores the meaning of words. The Wernicke's area's prime focus is language comprehension, which plays a critical role in understanding the nuances of language. It is the database that stores grammar and vocabulary information. With that database, it is responsible for interpreting ambiguous words, metaphors, semantic processing, and more. So what exactly happens in the brain when learning a second language? The first step is that Wernicke's area creates a new lexicon for the new language. Meaning the first language will have its own lexicon and the second language will have its own lexicon. A temporary lexicon will also be created. This will be the area of the brain that will allow the person to make connections between the two languages. It is where translation will occur, and it also explains mistakes and errors as the two languages intermingle with each other. Over time, as the person becomes fluent in the language, the temporary lexicon will disappear as the person is able to freely jump between the two languages.